What's up? Welcome back to the Presleevables March of the Machine edition. I'm your host, Cedric Phillips, joined as always by Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on Twitter. If you've joined us for our first handful of episodes, you've already seen us cover our top 5 battles and also our top 5 white cards. Today, we are dabbling into what Magic's most powerful color. Historically, yes. Though that may not be true here. Yikes.
Well, I don't know how much of it is these cards seeming modest or the white cards being particularly appealing or both, but I do think it's a noticeable step down from what we covered yesterday.
So, given that we are doing top 5 list, if it's your first time with us, thanks for hanging out. Make sure you do check out that battles video and the white cards from those top 5 lists. But speaking of the list, I, Cedric Phillips, am covering the top 5 competitive and constructed cards. And he, Patrick Sullivan, is covering the top 5.
My best or my favorite designs.
There you go.
Yeah.
As best we can.
Right. We almost made an honorable top 5 list for top 5 forks in blue. In this set, we got Convoke Fork, we got Battle Fork, we got Can't Be Forked Fork.
Yeah. We're fork flooded.
Yeah. There might be some other forks that I missed, but we're going to keep it here to just my favorite 5 designs and Cedric's bets for top 5 constructed players.
Beautiful. So, in our white episode, we had an honorable mention. We ain't got one of those today. Sorry. So, we're just going to kick things off, Patrick, with you. Number 5 on your list is
Tidal Terror.
4 UU, so 6 total mana for this 5/6 octopus. Whenever Tidal Terror attacks, you may tap 2 other untapped creatures you control. If you do, Tidal Terror can't be blocked this turn, and they brought back land cycling. This one has island cycling.
A lot to like here and just sort of greasing the wheels for limited play. 1, island cycling, great. You know, you do that pretty frequently when you're tight on mana, so it helps you get off the ground. Good nuts and bolts stuff. I like this execution quite a bit in terms of a large creature that can kind of break up a game. First of all, tap 2 creatures. That speaks to Convoke.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the synergies that work with Convoke will also work here as well. Things that care about tapping and untapping and all that kind of stuff. And I like to seed in some references to the mechanic that aren't the mechanic itself.
Okay.
That I really like a lot. Second, you have to really mean it with this one. And so the ability seems disproportionately valuable in games that are really rough, like it's a stalemate, no one can go, to be able to afford to tap 2 creatures and then attack with this thing. You had to be in a really clogged board for that to be powerful most of the time. So we're not talking about something with Island Walk or whatever that sort of arbitrarily breaks up a game.
Sure.
This requires quite a bit more work to get over the finish line. And yeah, I mean, not much to say, really. Pretty nuts and boltsy design. Also, last little thing I want to mention with this, really nice card to have alongside the +1/+1 counter mechanic.
Okay.
Because you're really in the market for evasion along with some of the keywords or mechanics that come along with that.
Sure. So for battle, it's a good place to put a counter, I guess.
Not battle, the backup.
Oh, backup. Yeah. Sorry. Yep,
yeah.
Okay.
So I like it as something that's like especially appealing to put backup stuff with, because you go backup, put a counter on this thing. Now the creature that I played wasn't going to be able to attack or do anything anyway because I just played it.
That as one of
so
the
it's
2.
like half haste plus you're grafting the keywords.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that's really going to materialize in terms of gameplay, but there's a lot of really subtle stuff that is going on here that I like. And also I think it plays pretty well just in a nuts and bolts baseline-y sort of way.
Okay. Number 5 on my list, the competitive constructed side of things, I'm going with Change the Equation, which is 1 and a U, so 2 mana instant. You get to choose just one of these. Counter target spell with mana value 2 or less, or counter target red or green spell with mana value 6 or less. So this can make some main decks. We have seen the original version of this card. Well, I was going to say it's Quench, but it's not actually, because it counters target spell with mana value 2 or less, where Quench makes you pay 2 more.
Yeah.
So it's not a mana leak type card. It's very specific in what it is countering in both sides of the equation. 2 or less, okay. I mean, that seems kind of powerful.
To me, the analog is Flash Freeze.
Okay.
And yeah, you don't get all the big stuff. And sometimes the big stuff really matters when you're talking about red and green cards.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a noticeable sort of gap there. but it's certainly more main deckable. I mean, if we got to the point in metagame where there was a healthy representation of red and green and you wanted something to add, I mean, it's not quite as good as Dispute, but it's the same sort of logic of it's really, really good against the right people, and it's serviceable enough against the other people that I don't mind playing it in the main deck.
Yeah, so as you mentioned with Mystical Dispute, because sometimes that card was a main deck card, but more often than not, it was a sideboard card, there will be metagames in which this does make sense to main deck, and that can be in multiple different formats, not just standard.
Yes.
Yeah, which is actually pretty nice about this card. Not overpowered, does what it does very, very well. I think, again, you can say the same thing as Mystical Dispute as far as an analog is concerned. And again, there will be some metagames where it does make sense to main deck.
Yeah, and certainly a solid sideboard card at the absolute floor.
Yeah. All right, number 4 on your list is
Halo Charge Scab.
4 and a blue, so that's a 5 mana 4/4 a zombie. When Halo Charge Scab enters the battlefield, each player mills 2 cards. Then you may put an instant, sorcery, or battle card from your graveyard on top of your library. So it's not exactly drawing a card.
No, it's you're not drawing a card.
Yes.
But I like the philosophy of what's going on here quite a bit. A critique that I have of the sets that really lean into mill is that it is confusing to a lot of novice players or low-level players. Milling my opponent, that makes sense. I'm destroying their cards. We know that's not really the case, but it feels that way. You're destroying your cards. And you can deck people. That's a win state. Why would I ever want to do that to myself?
Yep.
And so some of those formats that have a lot of self-mill and flashback, they're really great for invested and spiky players, but they can be a little opaque for newer players. So I like having some designs in there that sort of seed why this would be good. And this design does a great job of it because we're both getting milled. What happens to you as a result of that? Nothing. Milling is its own reward. You're down your 2 cards. Don't need to justify it any other way.
Okay.
What do I get out of it? Oh, I actually get selection and an opportunity to spike and an opportunity to get my favorite card back. It's a small thing, but I think designs like this really guide players towards understanding the mill experience in a way that's a little bit more straightforward and unambiguous than, say, milling and I've got a flashback card.
Sure.
Because I could also just cast my flashback card and then cast it again. It's not necessarily getting me all the way over the line in understanding what's going on. I think designs like this that are symmetrical, but I'm getting an implied bonus out of it that you don't get, is really great for getting it across the finish line for lower level players. And this isn't ruining any invested players' time either. This is a card that you and I could have fun with too.
That's true.
So really good nuts and bolts design again.
Okay. Number 4 on my list, excuse me, is Rona, Herald of Invasion. 1 and a U, so a 2 mana 1/3 legendary human wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap Rona, Herald of Invasion. You can tap it to draw a card and discard a card, so the old looter ability. And then for 5 and either a black mana or 2 life, because this is Phyrexian mana, you can transform Rona. You can only activate this ability as a sorcery, like we've seen with other cards in this set. And it turns into Rona Tolarian Obliterator, which is a 5/5 legendary Phyrexian wizard with trample. Whenever a source deals damage to Rona Tolarian Obliterator, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. Okay. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. All right, so don't damage this thing is probably the best course of action. Look, I'm looking at the front half of this card, not so much the back half, right? Sometimes the back half will come up when if you're playing in a prolonged game, you've got the mana to transform it. Great. The first thing I thought when I thought of Rona is the Esper Legends deck in Standard. Plaza of Heroes, Skrelv, Thalia, just all these legendary creatures. Great. This is another legendary creature. And sometimes we've seen that deck play some copies of the Raven Man or, frankly, some stinky legends to fit the bill. To me, this isn't the best legend, but it does provide filtering. Obviously, when you cast a legendary spell, you get to untap it and do it again. So it is really just a draw smoother with a little bit of upside in that particular strategy. And we've seen plenty of looter effects be good over the course of Magic's history. But that is what I identified with this card right away, is that this card goes into that deck in, I don't know, 1 or 2 of.
I think this card's really strong. Historically, I think people just underrate 2 mana looters.
Okay.
I mean, we're Baral, Chief of Compliance, and Jace Vryn's Prodigy both came in way higher than I think community consensus thought at the time. And this has the Baral thing of being a serviceable blocker early on in the game.
Yeah, just a 1/3.
So I think at a baseline, a 1/3 looter for 2 is already a card to think about in some situations.
Okay.
Probably not a card you play a lot of in 2023, but like it's worst cards have shown up in people's decks. Something
for
similar.
sure.
The legend thing is real.
Yep.
That trigger. And I think the activated ability, yes, it's not primarily what you're playing it for. It is a little edge casey, but it's nice to have a looter with a mana sink because that way you have another angle to smooth out your draws.
Sure.
It's like I can keep my lands and because I have expensive stuff in my hand, and also later on in the game, this becomes a mana sink too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of little things going on here, none of which are particularly powerful. And I think that confuses matters here with cards like this. But just the baseline 1/3 looter is already close to a card you would consider. And there's a lot more going on there than just that.
Feels like a 2 of. Probably don't want to play more than that. Maybe there's some metagames you want to play 3. I certainly don't think this is a 4 of. But as you said, just a 2-mana looter is just a good card. Yeah. Off the jump. Yeah. And I definitely agree with that. So that's number 4 for me. Now we're going to number 3 for you, which is
Assimilate Essence.
1 and a blue. So a 2-mana instant. Counter target creature or battle spell unless its controller pays 4. If they do pay the 4, you get to incubate 2, which of course means that he, Patrick, will be creating an incubator token with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can pay 2 generic mana and transform this artifact, and it transforms into a 0/0 Phyrexian artifact creature, so effectively you're getting a 2/2.
I really like soft counters that have an out or a bonus for playing them, even in the spot where your opponent can pay for them. You know, an issue that comes up with, let's say, Mana Leak as a design is we get to a point in the game where I can kind of play around Mana Leak for the entire time, and you're sitting there with a Mana Leak in your hand. It's not really that much fun for both of us, and neither of us get to have that much fun because I don't know that there's a Mana Leak in your hand. I'm just assuming, and you're stuck here with this Mana Leak in your hand that's bad and frustrating.
Yep.
A little bit of that is fine. It's not ruining anyone's day, but I do like the soft counter that has an out. And I like that this isn't cycling or something. Like you actually cast the thing and you get paid out with something different. I also think the story here is really strong. It feels like your mana is being siphoned and processed into an incubator.
Okay, sure.
So it's not just nothing from a storyline. And that's something I'm coming back to a lot with these designs, something that I really appreciate with the incubate designs in particular. They're not just like random mechanical whatever. A lot of them have like a story of stealing or draining or reappropriating that gets a certain tone across. And I think this is a really good example of that.
My number 3, I had to do some reaching here. Moment of Truth. 1 and a blue instant, so that's 2 mana. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of these cards in your hand, 1 into your graveyard, and 1 on the bottom of your library. So, first card I thought of when I saw this card was Strategic Planning, way back in the day. But we have seen 2 mana effects like this before. This is, if I'm thinking about 2 mana effects, this is not Impulse, but that is one. Shimmer of Possibility, Telling Time, that sort of thing. Expressive Iteration, this is not, because few things are, but there are decks in the market for this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think the selection is quite a bit better than Telling Time, because I think bottom mill draw is better than bottom top draw.
Yeah.
Because 1, you get the graveyard synergies, and 2, drawing your second best card when it's good is not as powerful as looting away the second worst card when it's bad.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So from a selection perspective, this is like pretty solid, I think.
Yeah, this is an exciting, this is the definition of like a role player. Maybe it will win our Doomblade Award, 5 years from now as best non-rare in the set. We'll see. But again, decks over the course of Magic's history have played this effect, which is basically 2 mana, look at a couple of cards, take one of them, Anticipate as another example.
Right.
But the milling of a card here means that you could, depending on what your deck looks like and depending on what the metagame looks like, effectively be drawing 2 cards.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, on to number 2 for you, which is
Artistic Refusal.
For you instant. So that's a 6 mana with Convoke. Okay, choose one or both. Counter target spell, or draw 2 cards, then discard a card.
So I appreciate, 1, that this is pretty modest. I think this would be a mistake to push. And but barring extreme circumstances around token generation and what have you, I would bet against this showing up in constructed. So because the play pattern can be a little rough with this stuff, I appreciate just like, yeah, we'll do it, and it's just not going to be all that strong. I think this card has a lot of just swinging moments and a really good cat and mouse game baked into it. I also like that the choose one or both is not fake here. There's a lot of times where it's, yeah, of course you're just doing both. But this one, because of the nature of Convoke, because you don't have the same number of untapped creatures from turn to turn or untapped lands, it's not trivial to just say, okay, well, you didn't play a spell this turn, I'm just going to hold this for another turn and do the same thing again.
Sure.
Circumstances might change. And so the draw to discard one to get out from under this is a real thing that will come up even at the cost of holding your counterspell some amount of the time. So I like that the choose one or both is actually a real thing in reality here. It's not made up. And I think a Convoke counterspell with the dream of being 0 mana, there's going to be a market for that sort of thing, even if the card isn't very strong.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of discipline in like not pushing this as hard as possible. If this was 5 mana, I would say this is probably one of the better blue cards in the entire set.
Sure.
Like if I was making your list at 5, this would probably be on there. So having the discipline to just be a little bit on the side of caution with something like this is great too.
My runner-up, my second place card for my constructed and competitive list is Fairy Mastermind. 1 and a blue, so 2 mana Fairy Rogue. 2/1, flash, flying. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. And you can pay 3 and a blue, so 4 total mana, to have each player draw a card. This is, of course, Yuta Takahashi's World Championship card. I know we always refer to these cards as invitational cards. It's kind of their new way, of course, Wizards of the Coast doing this sort of thing. This was unveiled at a Magic Con in Las Vegas last year, if memory does serve. And it is a super, super, super cool card. How powerful is it? I'm not sure. It strikes me as something that's good just because it's cheap.
I think this card's pretty good. What I keep coming back to is it has 4 lines of text, and I think it would be a card to think about if you removed any one of the lines of text.
Okay.
It would still be worth considering with any one of the 4 abilities removed.
Sure.
And it has all 4 of them. So yeah. I would bet that this one is going to show up. It's just so flexible, and there's creature type synergies, there's other card drawing synergies, there's just a lot of ways that this spider webs with stuff that people already play at a high rate. So I think this one is a safe bet to show up across a couple formats.
Whenever you see each player draws a card, it always is kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're just like, I don't want to ever give my opponent an additional card. And the first card that I kind of learned this lesson that it's not the end of the world was Jace Beleren.
Yeah.
Right. That was literally my moment of learning in Magic, where it's like, yeah, you can have a card like, because either like my cards are better than yours, or sometimes you're just going to draw a card that doesn't matter. It's not a guarantee that if you have both players draw a card, that your opponent's going to draw the best card possible.
Well, yeah, a lot of that experience speaks to mana efficiency too.
Mm-hmm.
If I've got a bunch of counterspells in my hand and you're drawing a bunch of 5-mana creatures, let's each draw 2 cards a turn and see how that goes.
Sure.
You're never going to be in a spot where you're playing 2 cards in one turn, and
Yep.
I'm going to be making all my land drops, using my leftover mana for stuff, and so. The symmetrical card drawing, historically a lot more powerful than I think people give it credit for.
Best invitational card of all time?
In terms of just pure rate?
Yeah.
I mean, that's tough. Let's go through the list. So I would say just in your average, let's say you're just putting them in standard and at a standard power level, my guess would be Dark Confidant.
Okay.
It's just sort of the best sort of generically. You can put this in a lot of decks, and if your opponent doesn't kill it right away, you're a pretty strong favorite to win the game. Once you start scaling up into larger formats, answer still could be Dark Confidant. It's not like it's bad in Legacy or Vintage or powered up formats. Cards like Sylvan Safekeeper start moving over kind of in that more in that line. Although in 2023, in Standard, I suspect that Avalanche Riders would be a stronger card than Dark Confidant most of the time.
Interesting.
Because there's just the game is oriented around creatures. People play removal spells all the time. Dark Confidant just dies some amount of the time. The losing life thing is not trivial when the game is balanced more around 4 or 5, 6 mana cards being good. And you just don't get Stone Rains at the rate of Avalanche Rider anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So It wouldn't surprise me now if it was actually different, but I think Dark Confidant's probably the safest bet.
My other votes potentially are Meddling Mage.
Yep.
And Snapcaster Mage.
Yep.
I think Snapcaster Mage is a little bit format dependent because there are times it's very good, obviously, and there are times where it's just okay. Dark Confidant is extremely powerful, as you mentioned. And then the rest, like Shadow Mage Infiltrator, kind of outmoded now at this point. And then I was looking at Ranger of Eos, and that one just seems just okay.
Yeah. I mean, the Shadow Mage Infiltrator was outmodded at the time.
Yeah.
It was,
because it's like a dog.
Yeah.
So nothing too crazy going on there with John Finkel's card. Now it's time to go on to number one. We're starting with him, but we're also going to come here as well because for the second episode in a row, we have the same card on the top of our list. Not by design, but I think this is a really cool card and a really powerful card, and that is Zephyr Singer. 2 UU. So 4 mana, 3/4 Siren Pirate with Convoke. It has flying, it has vigilance, and when Zephyr Singer enters the battlefield, put a flying counter on each creature that convoked it. So here's why I like it for a competitive play. 4 mana, 3/4 flying vigilance. That's like a pretty good card, just from like a base rate. We've seen plenty of 4 mana, 3/4 flyers in Magic's history. First one that comes to mind is Restoration Angel, but that's got a lot going on. The thing that stood out to me here is, one, giving your other creatures flying is a pretty big deal. But two, you might have to think to yourself, well, I don't want to take a turn off to do that. That's initially what I thought too. But then I thought about Venerated Loxodon, which was a card that you took your turn off to put the 4/4 into play and also boost your other creatures. And if you look back historically, that card was very good in those white-based strategies. You didn't mind taking the turn off on turn 3 to effectively build your battlefield into creatures that are more powerful, and then also getting a 4/4 on top of that. And I get some similar vibes here. The creature type, Siren Pirate, that's not great. We'll see what happens when Magic takes its return to Ixalan, where Sirens and Pirates actually do matter. But everything else here seems pretty good to me from a competitive standpoint.
And I really like the design too. I've mentioned a couple times I'm kind of critical of the all flying experience. I don't think it leads to very interactive games. This has some of the flying experience, but the way that it's set up here is just so much more novel than how it is most of the time. First of all, part of what you're paying for is vigilance. Vigilance only matters typically if you intend on blocking.
Sure.
So you're already paying, however you want to talk about how you're paying for this card, the opportunity cost, the mana, the other cards you have to play around it. Some of what you're paying for is vigilance. And so that makes the game sort of definitionally not just a two ships passing in the night where we're not interacting at all. The Convoke trigger. First of all, it has the cool execution of Convoke that I really like, which is obviously it's good with cheap stuff because Convoke is good when the stuff is cheap to do it really efficiently. But when you're improving the card that convoked, there is some incentive to have some things that are actually good to give flying to. We're not just talking about giving it to your Merfolk or the Pearl Trine or whatever. You want to play some things substantial, or you're picking one path versus the other. And in reality, you're probably doing a blend of it where you have some stuff that's cheap and some stuff that's like good to give flying counters to.
Okay.
What I also like about this as far as flying lords go is that obviously putting a flying counter on something is only useful if the thing previously did not have flying.
Yes.
Which means that the games that you don't draw Zephyr Singer, you don't have your creatures with flying. So it's just a more replayable experience over the sum of 20, 40, 100 games, because it's not like you draw this card every single game. So whatever enablers that you're giving flying to don't just deterministically have flying all the time. It's predicated on drawing this and it resolving and then the creature surviving. So, like I said, I don't really like the all-flyer experience. I think it's pretty bad, pretty over-indexed. I think Magic is a little bit too indulgent with flying lords at a high rate and all that kind of stuff. But as far as that experience goes, this is one of the better executions that I've seen. And the fact that it's leaning into set mechanics is a cherry on top. My only piece of criticism here, a little weird to use flying counters in a set that has a planeswalker that permanently gives creatures flying that does not use flying counters.
Here's looking at you, Archangel Elspeth. It's weird.
Did the card not fit if you call that flying counters? Do you not want to put 2+1/+1 counters and a flying counter and an angel counter on something? Sure. I can understand not wanting to do it, but it is a little bit of visceral unpleasantness looking at flying counters and permanently acquiring flying but not getting a counter.
Yeah, it's a little strange. It's a little strange.
Small critique in the scheme of things. This is a really well-crafted design, I think.
So that's our top 5 list for our blue cards for competitive and constructed, and of course for game design. So, a couple of things on our way out the door. Number 1, if you haven't done so yet, we'd love for you to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz on the channel. You can, of course, in the comments, let us know what you think about each of our top 5 lists. What do you think we got right? What do you think we got wrong? What's on your top 5 list in the various categories that we have here? And we can reply to those comments as well. If you're not already a patron, feel free to sign up on our Patreon at patreon.com/theresleevables, where you can get advanced episodes of the Resleevables. You get some cool swag depending on what membership level you're at. You also get access to our unsleeved podcast as well, which we do once every other week. Next up is black, which is less of a struggle than blue.
There's some heaters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Black has no shortage of goodies.
I bet your list could have been 10 long.
I got 7.
Yeah.
I got to 7 very easily. Cutting the last 2 out was not great. You might have an honorable mention for that episode.
Sure.
Perfect. So we're going to see you back here for the black cards. Thanks for watching.